So, I'd just like to welcome you all to our monthly Reiki share and our weekly podcast. This week on the podcast and in this month in the Reiki share, I was really guided to begin our talking about the Ukraine and what's happening there. And actually, some of the messages that have been coming into me around that and some of the messages I've heard from some of my students and things like that. And I think and hope that you will all find it quite interesting. Before we get started, I'd just like to let everybody know that if you're interested in taking any of the licensed Holy Fire Yusui Reiki classes, I'm teaching the full lineup, level 1 and 2 and masters, in an Australian friendly time zone, which means early mornings in Australia and evenings in North America. And I'm teaching those beginning next weekend. After the following weekend, I begin teaching the full lineup of the ICRT Animal Reiki training, and those are online classes in an Australian friendly time zone. For those of you who would like to join us in person, I'm having a combination online and in-person class in May. That'll be a hybrid class. So if you want to join in person, you can. If you want to join online, and those will be offered in the Atlantic time zone, and it will be the license level 1 and 2 and masters and the animal Reiki level 1 and 2 and masters. And that's being followed by an animal communication class. And then in July, I'll be teaching online those same classes. But in August, I'll be teaching an online animal communication class, as well as an online Karuna Reiki masterclass, also in the Australian friendly time zone. In July, it's the Atlantic time zone, but the Karuna and animal communication are in the Australian friendly time zone. I was guided to take a pause from our Reiki business book this week just because of the events that were happening in the Ukraine. And I received a really strong calling to both talk about them this evening and also some other things that are happening around the world. And also so that we could work together collectively to send Reiki to all of these conflict situations that are happening in the world. And we'll be back with the Reiki business book next week on the podcast, and next month in our Reiki share we will have the Q&A that I'd planned to have this evening. But I really thought that it was important for us to get together tonight and talk about this. Before we get too far in, though, I'd like to invite everybody to bring your hands together in Gasho. Close your eyes and just activate your Reiki energy. Just inviting any symbols to join you. Just imagining the energy and the symbols flowing down from the highest heavens to in front of your hands and into your heart. Imagine the symbols and energies flowing up from the divine earth through your hands and into your heart. The gift of love. And I invite you to imagine or just notice the divine ones, the divine animal kingdom, the enlightened beings, the angels, the archangels, and the brothers and sisters of the light that are standing at the corners of the land and on every side of us. They too are shining their light into the light around us, and that light shines through our hands and into our hearts. The gift of love. And today, as we talk about some of the distressing things that are happening in the world, I invite us all to remain in a space of love, looking at them through the filter of love. where all things are possible. And just releasing the duality so that we do not go into fear. The opposite of love is not hate, it is fear. And so many of the events of late have caused us to move into a space of fear, or have brought the fear that exists within us to the surface. And tonight, we ask that fear to be released so that we might continue to remain in the perspective of love. It is from that place that we can be the most effective. It can be very difficult to be powerful and effective and to create an impact when we are coming from a place of fear, creating from the place of the wound. And so tonight creates an opportunity to let go of that fear and to just firmly install ourselves into the perspective of love. And just feeling the Reiki flow through you and around you, releasing the fear from your mind, your body, your soul, and your spirit. The Reiki energy flows in through and around every cell of your body and every part of your being. And if there is fear, worry, frustration, concern, anger, rigidity, bracing, if that exists anywhere, we release it all now with love. And we invite the energy of love to flow through and around every cell in our body and every part of our being, filling the vacant spaces that fear left behind. And we'll spend a few moments just feeling the love and the peace surround us. Peace within, peace without. Peace be with you. Amen. So guys, I just want to thank you all for being here, and for those that are listening after, for listening. I think that for many of us, what is happening in the Ukraine has been really concerning, and I think that the fact that not only is this war, but it's war that has already been threatened to escalate into nuclear proportions, makes this war, for some people, even more concerning than some of the many wars that are also taking place on the planet. One of the things, though, that I do want to bring up is that at this moment in time, there are 21 additional wars that are taking place on the planet. And I think that sometimes we lose sight of that, because some of those wars have been happening over years, or maybe they're a little further away, or maybe they are a slightly smaller scale. But right now, there are 21 wars happening. Some of them are civil wars. There are 3 actually that have had over 10,000 casualties. So they are considered in the more major category. And that is in the year 2022. There are currently 21 wars. And tonight, in addition to sending Reiki to the situation in the Ukraine, I'd really like for us to also focus on those regions as well. And when we take it even a little bit further, I think that there can also be conflict or wars that happen around us in our communities. There can be drug wars, gang wars, significant conflict. I'm even thinking of the conflict here in Canada around the truckers' convoy recently. And then if I go back even further, I think about the conflict with some of the political things that have happened with our neighbors to the south. I think of conflict that has happened around COVID and whether to vaccinate or not to vaccinate. I think about conflict that happened during Black Lives Matter. And there is just so much conflict that exists around us at any given point in time. And yet, even with that, and there can also be conflict within families, and there can also be conflict within us ourselves. So I think that tonight, what I'd like to do is to address conflict in general, because what happens is that as within, so without, or as above, so below. The energy outside of us always reflects the energy inside of us. And I think that you've all heard me talk about duality. And I think that so much of this conflict, regardless of where it comes from, it does present an opportunity for us to allow the duality to release within us. And duality is that combination of love and fear. The fact that we are not purely love and we are not purely fear or hate. We're all some combination of that. And I think that all of this conflict that has been happening on the world today is happening because we are ending an era and we are moving into another era. I believe we're ending an era of so many things. I think things like patriarchy, materialism, so many things are winding down at this time and coming to an end. Even our reliance on oil and gas, I think, is starting to wind down, whatever phase that it's in. So many things are finishing their cycle as we move into another cycle. And I think that all of this conflict is now bringing up this fear so that it can be released and so that we can release the duality. With that being said, even with all of this that I've just told you, the 21 wars, including at least one that has the threat of global nuclear disaster, the conflicts that exist in all of these places. Did you know that this is the most peaceful time that has ever existed? This is a time when there is less death and destruction. There is more literacy. There is less child labor. There, almost all of the major indicators of how well society is doing are at an all-time high. And even just thinking back to wars in Vietnam, some of the previous wars, like there was a lot more death and destruction happening than what we're seeing now. So it can be really tempting to be very overwhelmed and very stressed and think, oh my gosh, this is the worst time ever. But if you actually sit down and look at the numbers, and the reason I say that is that there is a very smart man who did, his name is Steven Pinker, and he wrote a book called The Better Angels of Our Nature. And he's talking in his book about how things have continually improved. And but that we can lose sight of that because, and one of the major reasons that he says we lose sight of that, it's not just the information age and the fact that we have all of this information that we didn't have before, but it also has to do with perspective. And what he talks about is the fact that most of our information comes through the news and through journalists. And I don't mean to say anything against journalists, do a really great job, and they're absolutely essential. And I know that probably I actually toured Auschwitz in Poland when I was there back in 1998. And I managed to hold it together looking at all of the horror that had happened until I got to the shrine to the journalists who had lost their lives in order to report this to the world, even though they weren't necessarily listened to. So journalists have an absolutely important role, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for them. But in Steven Pinker's words, what he said was, if it bleeds, it leads. If it's not sensationalist, it doesn't make a story. And so much of what we hear in the news is, we have to ask ourselves, is it true? And we've noticed lately, I don't know about you guys, but I worked for the government in the early part of my career. And one of the things that happened was I was trained in how to talk to media and how to spin things so that you could get your message across. And so it's so interesting to me that we live in a time that has so much freedom, that you can hear all kinds of different opinions and perspectives on things. And I notice, for instance, in the news that, and then there's social media, which can, isn't always fact-based, let's face it. And yet that can put a lot of information out as well, and opinions and perspectives. And so it's a time of inner authority when it's up to us to decide what we believe. And I notice that some of the news programs, those guys are creating fake news, and we have the real news. And then these guys say, well, those guys have the fake news and we have the real news. And the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. It's probably neither this perspective or that perspective. It's maybe even a slanted or crooked line in there. So I think that there's no better time for us to look to Reiki to assist us in discernment as to what we want to believe. And I'm also not naive enough to feel, I've been reading some of the reports on the Ukraine and what's happening there, for instance. And I'm not naive enough to think that by reading a few articles, I have a good handle on it. And I will say that much of the news I'm reading is one-sided. I'd be very curious to see what the other side is, because whenever you have an enemy, there's duality. And I had a very clever student send a message to me that really articulated what the energy was trying to say, because at first I was reading very one-sided reports about the Ukraine. Actually, that's all I can get, is very one-sided reports about the Ukraine. And are they true? I don't know. Probably there's some truth to them, but there's probably another side that I'm not getting. And in the meantime, it's very easy to say Putin is evil, and so let's all send Reiki to the Ukraine and money to the Ukraine and forget about the other guys. And I know that the situation is more complex than that. And I know that the energy has come in and said, no, you need to send Reiki to the situation as a whole until you can heal any of that duality within you so that you can send Reiki to both for a peaceful resolution on both sides that works for both. It's really easy in this age of conflict to find an enemy. For a while, we were all united against COVID, that evil disease of COVID. You know what? COVID brought some really positive things too. And it did bring some negative things, but some positive. So again, we had the truth was probably somewhere in the middle, that there was some positive and some negative. So what my friend said was she was using the words and verses. And because whenever we can create an enemy to place our anger and our conflict toward, no matter who it is, whatever war on drugs, internal wars, internal conflicts, whatever it is, whenever we can find an enemy, it is much easier than doing the work and releasing the duality in ourselves so that we can see a little bit more from both sides of things, or that we can determine our own truth. And there's nothing wrong with that. Colleen Benelli has said that there are 7 billion people on the planet. I think there might be a little more than that now, and 7 billion different perspectives or different versions of the truth. You all know that I talk to Source regularly, or God, or whomever, whatever name you want to use. And I hear back. And one of the pictures, sometimes we talk in words, but sometimes it's more pictures that I need to interpret or understand. And one of the pictures I saw was of Mother, Father, God being this enormous, beautiful ball of light, and all of us around it, facing it. But of course, if I'm on this side and you're on that side, we have a different perspective. And even the person right next to me has a slightly different perspective. So it makes sense that there are this many different perspectives in the world. And the thing that I want to invite you to do is to ask Reiki to help you determine the truth of your own perspective. It's okay to have your own perspective. One of the things that I think with COVID, for instance, that hurt me the most is how it tore families apart. Families that you don't have a vaccine. I have people who chose not to get a vaccine, and I think it's fabulous that I did get a vaccine, but I think it's fabulous that we live in a world that we can each have our own perspective and make our own choices about that. And, but I've heard of families who aren't speaking to each other because of choices around getting a vaccine. And I think, isn't that ridiculous? That's choosing an enemy, choosing the versus rather than releasing the duality within ourselves. So the perspective of my student was that whenever we hear versus, whenever we have an enemy, that's duality. And it's really important for us to continue working through that until it's an opportunity. It's always an opportunity to release duality within ourselves. And then we can send Reiki to helping others release the duality as well. And that's what I hope we can do tonight. And when we can move to and, so that I want to send Reiki to the Ukraine and to Russia and to all of the people involved, then we have released the duality. So I think that's going to be a really great guidepost that we can use going forward. Now, one of the things I was guided to do was to look up a few definitions for us. Thank you for the hearts. One of the definitions was war. And the Oxford Dictionary describes war as a state of armed conflict between different countries or different groups within a country. And then I was guided to look up the definition of conflict. The definitions of conflict there are several. There is a definition that's around opposition. There's a definition that's around violence, and there's a definition that's around disagreement. And then I was guided to look up duality. And duality is the state of having two parts or aspects. So what I believe we are facing with all of the conflict that exists in the world today, and the conflict that exists maybe within our own personal world and even within ourselves, is this duality, this combination of love and fear. So one of the things that I invite you to think about today is, where does conflict exist in your heart, around you? Is there conflict externally in these other countries? Is there conflict maybe within your family, your career, within yourself? Where does conflict exist within you? And just give that a few moments to reflect, maybe with your Reiki hands on your heart, and just think about, where does conflict exist in my life? Another way to think about conflict is, where do you hear versus, or where do you have an enemy? Is there anyone you're angry with, or that even that maybe you hate or haven't forgiven? And understanding that our outer and inner worlds are always going to resemble each other, we have an opportunity to let go of the enemies, the versus. We have an opportunity today to release the duality, the sides, or the enmity that exists within us and outside of us. This is an opportunity to release the shadow that exists, that prevents us from experiencing our light in its fullest form. One of the things that can the most helpful to us in releasing this duality and in connecting with the oneness is moving into coherence with the earth. And so today we will start our meditation connecting with the heartbeat of the earth. And that's going to be followed by an experience for discernment and listening, which is in chapter 1 of the Reiki business book. Just asking Reiki to help us determine the truth, our reality, and also to release the brace so that we can also accept that other people do not have to have our version of reality. They do not have to feel the same way that we do, and that's perfectly okay. We allow everyone their own perspective, but we will be moving into a perspective of love. And then finally, we'll finish up with a third meditation to bring inner peace and outer peace. And we will also be sending Reiki energy to peace on the planet and to the major conflicts that are going on. And we'll start out in the world, and we'll move into your own countries, your communities, your families, your coworkers, and so forth, and then yourself. So I'm just going to invite you all to make yourselves really comfortable for the meditations today. And just go ahead and close your eyes and take some deep breaths. And if they're not already there, I invite you to place your hands on your heart and feel the Reiki flow through your hands and into your heart. As the light of Reiki, the light of the earth, and the light of divine beings, and the light of creation surrounds you and fills your breath. As you breathe in the light, it travels in on your breath. It fills your body with light, and the light within you wakes up and is revealed in you. And this causes you to remember your love, your higher consciousness, and your pure heart. You can see them now. And at the same time, the light of the earth is revealed in you as you remember that your body is made of the earth to give your spirit life and breath. And the light of the divine is revealed in you as you remember that your spirit is made of the light. You are here in your life to be human in this moment in time. And the light of creation and the light of your body are one light within you. Your divine nature is present in your human nature, and you remember your beautiful spirit, your life force. It is here in your body and in your life in this moment in time. Listen now to the heartbeat of the earth. Listen to the heartbeat of the waters and all life in the waters. Listen to the heartbeat of the animals and the trees and the birds in the trees. You can hear the heartbeat of creation in the four winds and in the cycles and rhythm of the moon and the sun. In the rhythm of the stars in the night sky, the planets, and our solar system. You can hear the heartbeat of the Milky Way, of the galaxies and the universe, and the heartbeat of creation. It all beats in the same rhythm as your own dear heart. And so your body aligns with the heartbeat and the rhythms and the cycles of the earth. And the heartbeat and rhythm and cycles of creation. One heartbeat, one light, one breath, right now, in this moment in time in your daily life. The power of love at the core of the physical world, the light of pure consciousness becoming all things. You bring this awareness now into your body, that you are like all life on earth. You are part of the earth, part of the animal kingdom. Everything here lives in the rhythms and the cycles of this beautiful planet. Bring your awareness to your body now and listen. Hear your heart beating in your body, in your life today, and breathe into this moment. Imagine the light filling your heart chakra with Reiki. And now below your heart chakra to your solar plexus, allow the Reiki energy to completely fill that with Reiki. And we'll move to the sacral chakra. And the base chakra. Just activating all of our chakras today as we learn to listen to Reiki and to let go of our own agendas and our own duality. Now allow the Reiki energy to fill your throat chakra and to activate your authentic voice. And then your third eye or your intuition. And finally, the crown chakra at the top of your head. And then come back to your heart. Today we are letting Reiki lead. And if it feels comfortable to you, you may even decide to adopt the way of Reiki, which is surrendering completely to the Reiki energy. But regardless of your decision, today we will allow Reiki to lead us. We ask it to guide us and heal us so that we may be of greater service to ourselves and to others. We invite it to assist us so that we may develop discernment. The discernment to cut through the clutter. The clutter of the media and of other people's opinions, perspectives. The discernment to determine our own truth and to know when what we are hearing is largely one-sided. We invite the Reiki energy and the discernment with the Reiki energy to help us recognize when we have an enemy, when we are in conflict, when we are in that one versus another mentality. And we invite the Reiki energy to remind us to apply Reiki at such times to release the duality, to recognize the inner conflict or turmoil, and to move us into that oneness, that wholeness, that completeness, the and mentality. And now with our chakras open and engaged, with any blocks that may have existed within them released, and with our energy centers functioning fully. We can learn to listen with Reiki. Listening with all of the parts of ourselves, listening with our mind, our body, our soul, our spirit, with our intellect, our emotions, listening with our heart, listening with every cell of our body, with every chakra, listening in complete alignment with who we are, with love as our filter and love at the core of our being. I invite you to listen with love, with your mind. And now to listen with love, with your body. To listen with love, with your emotions. Listen with love, with your imagination open and with every part of your being. Listen for your path forward. Listen for the next step in your healing or your development. Listening to the guidance of Reiki. Now from this space surrounded by Reiki and filled with Reiki and listening with Reiki. Listening for your own truth and your own perspective. Listening with the assistance of the beautiful enlightened beings that are here with us. We invite the light that surrounds us and flows through us to surround the layers and the ways and worries of the world that we carry, to surround the conflict within us, the wars, and any unforgiveness that may exist there. Any brace, any enmity. And as the Reiki energy surrounds all of these layers, they lift them from us. Lifting them and taking them into a place where they will be listened to and heard and nurtured and healed. And we'll spend some time here just allowing our own conflict and duality and war, any of the versus mentality, enmity within us, to release. And then we'll move on to the other areas that need Reiki cleansing and Reiki energy today. And the light of peace flows through you now, and of harmony. And as peace and harmony fill you, even more layers and conflict and discord are released into the light. Peace and harmony envelop and surround every cell of your body and every part of your being. And just allow them to fill you completely now. Allow peace and harmony to fill your heart. Releasing any heart walls, any injuries or trauma that exists there. And then allow peace and harmony to fill your mind. Releasing drama and trauma and those circular thoughts, chaos, confusion, conflict. Now allow peace and harmony to fill your body completely. Every part of your physical being, every cell. Releasing any injuries or trauma. Conflict. And now we invite peace and harmony to flow into our emotions. Our emotions are a place where conflict often shows up. Your emotions are a tool that make you aware of information that exists below your level of consciousness. And so as we release the conflict in our emotions and allow them to be surrounded and buoyed by peace and harmony and love, We also release the duality that exists below the surface, below our level of consciousness. Now we invite the light of peace and harmony and love to fill our soul, our spirit, our inner voice and our inner critic. And as it does, as it fills the inner critic and the inner voice, we have an opportunity to become gentler with ourselves and to release the conflict and duality that can exist within us, as we can be our own harshest critic. Now the light of peace and harmony and love begin to overflow. They fill our energy and our aura. And then they reach out, stretching out to our family, our close friends, our colleagues, those we are the closest to. Peace and harmony flows through us. And now through them. Releasing some of their conflict. Some of their fear and duality. And as they become filled with peace and harmony and love, the peace and harmony stretches out even further to our more distant relatives and more distant friends. And then it reaches out into our community. It reaches out a little further into our greater community, our province or our state, our county. And then the peace and harmony flows out into our country, We particularly ask the peace and harmony to flow to our friends in Australia who are experiencing devastating floods. And from there, peace and harmony continues to flow and overflow. And we invite it to overflow into some of the conflicts that exist on the earth. We send peace and harmony as a collective to the conflict in the Ukraine and Russia. And we send them love. Love from the Creator and love from our own dear hearts. And we ask for a swift resolution. One that works for everyone involved. We may not be capable of seeing that as a possibility. Reiki energy has access to the field of possibilities. At the same time, we invite this peace and harmony that overflows through us, through our families, our communities, our countries. We ask it to flow through the civil war in Ethiopia, the drug war in Mexico, and the civil war in Yemen and Saudi Arabia. And we ask it to flow through some of the slightly smaller wars, whether they be a combination of terrorist, insurgent, and civil wars in Algeria, in Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Chad, the Republic of Congo, Iraq, Libya, Mali, Mozambique, Nigeria, Tanzania, Tunisia, Colombia, Myanmar, Syria, and the South Sudan. We invite the energies to reach out to all of the homes in the world that are existing in a state of conflict. All of the people who are existing in a state of conflict, who are suffering for whatever reason. And we'll spend some time here today just spreading and sharing our light with the planet and the lights of peace and harmony. And just feeling our hearts connect today in oneness. Oneness within ourselves, oneness with each other, and oneness with all of the people and the animals and the plants on the planet. I invite you to connect now with the world peace grids, the North and South Poles in Israel, in Michigan, in Maui, and on Mount Kurama. And through the grids, we invite the Reiki energy to flow. Throughout the planet. We ask for peace on the planet. We ask for peace within us. And release conflict and duality. And we recognize our wholeness and our oneness. And we say, may the followers of all the world's religions and spiritual paths work together to create peace among all people on earth. Thank you for being the light that you are in the world. And thank you for joining us here today. Thank you for being a part of this collective broadcast of peace for the planet. Namaste and Amen. Ashe, Shalom. And so it is. Thank you. I invite you to stay here as long as you'd like. And when you are ready, you're welcome to return. Thank you and namaste.